The hanging tree. A tale of conscience and courage. The Texas sun didn't just burn it, accused. Every ray felt like a finger, pointing at guilt, at cowardice, at all the things decent men pretended not to see. Jedediah Cross saw her from half a mile away. At first, he thought it was a scarecrow, something farmers put up to frighten crows from their fields. But scarecrows didn't move when the wind blew. Scarecrows didn't have shadows that stretched across the scorched earth like accusations. As his horse drew closer, Jed's stomach turned to ice. A young woman hung suspended between two wooden posts, her body stretched in a grotesque mockery of crucifixion. Her wrists and ankles were bound with rope so tight it had carved deep grooves into her flesh. Blood had dried in dark rivulets down her arms and legs. Her buckskin dress was torn, exposing bruises that told stories no one should have to read. She was Apache, maybe 19, maybe younger. Hard to tell through the layers of dirt and suffering. Jed pulled his horse to a stop 30 yards away, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle on his saddle. He was 47 years old, a cattleman who'd spent the last decade minding his own business and staying out of other people's wars. That was how you survived in the territories. You kept your head down. You did your work. You didn't ask questions about bodies hanging on other men's land. Then the girl lifted her head. Her eyes found his dark, fierce, defiant, despite everything. Her lips moved, cracked and bleeding, forming words that barely carried on the wind. Don't. Not a plea. A warning. Don't do it. Jed looked past her to the ridge beyond, where a group of men sat on horseback. Watching, waiting, at their center, was a figure everyone in 3 counties knew, Silas Crow, the biggest landowner in West Texas. The man who decided what was law and what was suggestion. The man who made problems disappear. Crow sat relaxed in his saddle, arms crossed, a thin smile on his weathered face. He wasn't hiding what he'd done. He was advertising it. This is what happens to people who cross me. Dodd knew the smart play. Turn his horse around, ride back to his small ranch, pretend he'd seen nothing. Live to see tomorrow. The girl's eyes were still on him. Not begging, just witnessing. Memorizing the face of another man, who would choose to live, rather than do right. Jed thought about his father, dead, 20 years now. Thought about the last thing the old man had said before a Comanche arrow took him. A man who won't stand up for what's right ain't a man at all. He's just meat pretending to be human. Jed climbed off his horse. God damn it, he muttered under his breath. God damn it all to hell. He walked toward the hanging posts, his boots crunching on sun-baked earth. Every step felt like walking toward his own grave. Behind him, he heard laughter from the ridge. Crow's men, enjoying the show. Jed stopped beneath the wooden frame, looking up at the girl. Up close, she was in even worse shape, dehydrated, beaten, rope burns layered over older scars. Someone had done this to her before. What's your name? He asked quietly. She didn't answer. Just kept staring at him with those fierce, unbroken eyes. I'm going to cut you down, he said. That's going to make some powerful people angry. You understand that? I know, she whispered, her voice like sand scraping on glass. That's why I told you not to. Jed pulled his knife from his belt. The blade was old cavalry issue, worn smooth by 20 years of hard use. It caught the sunlight as he reached up to the rope, binding her right wrist. What's she being accused of? He called out, not turning around. Crow's voice drifted across the prairie, calm and assured. Trespassing, disobedience. Being where she doesn't belong. On whose authority? Mine. That's the only authority that matters out here. Jed cut the first rope. The girl's arm fell, and she gasped, not in relief but in pain, as blood rushed back into oxygen-starved limbs. You're making a mistake, Cross, Crow called out. That girl's my problem. You take her down, she becomes your problem. And I don't forget my problems. Jed cut the second rope. The girl collapsed into his arms, her weight nearly taking him to the ground. She was lighter than she should have been. All bone and desperation. He carried her to his horse and laid her across the saddle. Then he turned to face Crow and his men. I'm taking her to Fort Stockton, Jed said. Let the army decide what's right and wrong. Crow's smile widened. The army? Cross. The army drinks at my saloon, buys their horses from my ranch, and sleeps with my girls. You really think they're going to side with an Apache squaw over me? Maybe not, but at least I'll sleep tonight, knowing I tried. Jed climbed onto his horse behind the girl, keeping her steady with one arm. As he turned to leave, Crow's voice stopped him cold. You've got 24 hours, Cross. After that, you and that girl are both mine. And I promise what she went through will seem kind compared to what's coming. Jed didn't respond, just spurred his horse forward, riding away from the hanging posts and toward a future that had just gotten very complicated. Behind him. The wooden frame stood empty, rope swaying in the hot wind like a noose that had missed its mark, but Jed knew it wouldn't stay empty long. Men like Crow always needed someone hanging, to remind everyone else what happened when you forgot your place. Jed's ranch was 15 miles north, a small operation with 40 head of cattle, a barn that leaned like a drunk, and a cabin that had seen better days before Jed was even born. But it was his, and more importantly, it was far enough from Crow's land that a man could think without feeling eyes on his back. He carried the Apache girl inside, and laid her on his bed, the only soft surface in the place. In the lamplight, the extent of her injuries became clear. Rope burns at wrists and ankles, whip marks across her back, bruises in the shape of fingers around her throat. This wasn't punishment. This was torture. Jed heated water on the stove, tore strips from an old shirt, and began cleaning her wounds. She didn't cry out, didn't flinch. Just endured, like someone who'd learned that showing pain only invited more of it. You need to tell me what happened, Jed said, as he wrapped her wrist. Why Crow hung you up like that? Silence. I can't help if I don't know what I'm up against. More silence. Jed finished bandaging her ankles and sat back. Fine. Tomorrow, I'm taking you to Fort Stockton. You can tell your story to the army. They'll know. The word came out sharp, final no. Jed frowned. Girl, you need protection. Crow's not going to your law, is not my law. She turned her head to look at him, and for the first time, he saw not fear, but fury in her eyes. Your law is what let him take our land. Your law is what hung my father from a tree and called it justice. Your law is why I was tied up in the first place. Jed opened his mouth, then closed it. What could he say? She wasn't wrong. Then what do you want me to do? He asked finally. The girl sat up slowly, moving like every bone in her body hurt. She reached into her torn dress and pulled out a piece of tanned leather, folded and stained with dried blood. This, she said, unfolding it carefully. Jed leaned forward. It was a map, crude but clear. Rivers, hills, boundary markers. And written in English along one edge, surveyed by Thomas Whitmore, U.S. Government Land Office, 1869. What am I looking at? The real border, the girl said. The line between Apache land and white man's land. Before Crow moved the markers. Before he claimed 20,000 acres that were never his. Jed studied the map closely. He'd lived in this territory for 15 years and knew the land like he knew his own hands. If this map was accurate and it looked official enough to be, then Crow had been stealing land for years. Where did you get this? My father was the translator when the government surveyor came through. He kept a copy. Crow found out she swallowed hard. He made my father disappear. Then he came for me. Why not just kill you? Why the public torture? Because he needs the original map. This is just a copy. The real one is hidden with my people. 2 days' ride from here. He was hanging me to make them bring it to him. To trade my life for the truth. Jed folded the map carefully, his mind racing. This wasn't just about one girl. This was about land, money, power, everything that made men like Crow dangerous. If I take you to Fort Stockton with this map, Crow owns Fort Stockton. The commander drinks his whiskey and takes his bribes. The moment you show up with me, you'll both disappear. Then where? San Antonio. There's a federal marshal, Theramus Reed. He's one of the old ones. Honest, scared of no one. She looked at Jed. but it's 200 miles. Through Crow's territory, he'll have men hunting us before sunrise. Jed stood, walked to the window, looked out at the darkness. 200 miles. A wounded girl, and Silas Crow's entire operation trying to stop them. The smart play was obvious. Hand her over, apologize, claim he was confused, that he'd made a mistake. Crow might let him live if he groveled enough, but Jed's father's voice echoed in his head. A man who won't stand up for what's right ain't a man at all. We leave at dawn, Jed said. You'll ride. I'll ride. We stop only when we have to, and if Crow catches us, we don't surrender. Understood? The girl nodded, something like respect flickering in her dark eyes. What's your name? Jed asked. She hesitated. Then It means eternal blossom. Well, let's hope that blossoming includes surviving the next 200 miles. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the distant sound of hoofbeats. Crow's men were already coming. They rode out at first light. Before the sun had time to fully wake, Jed had packed light. Jerky, hardtack, to canteens, ammunition for his rifle and his revolver. Everything else got left behind. Speed was their only advantage. Ayanna rode behind him, her arms wrapped around his waist to keep from falling. She was still weak, but her grip was iron. Survivors didn't give up easily. They headed southeast, avoiding the main trails. Jed knew every game path, every dry creek bed, every place where a man could hide from prying eyes. He'd been a scout during the Indian Wars, before he'd decided he was done killing people for land that wasn't his. Those skills were about to get tested again. They made good time the first day, 30 miles through rough country. By nightfall, they'd reached a place Jed knew, an old line shack. Abandoned years ago when the cattle drives moved east, no fire. Cold camp. They ate jerky in silence while the Texas darkness pressed down around them. Tell me about this Marshall Reed, Jed said finally. How do you know he's different? My father told stories. Said Reed was the only white lawman who kept his word. When the army came to move our people, Reed argued against it. Lost his job for it. Took him 2 years to get another badge. In San Antonio, where no one cared about his politics. And you think he'll help us? I think he'll listen. That's more than most. Jed nodded. Then we get to San Antonio. Whatever it takes. They took turns, sleeping 2 hours on, 2 hours off. During Jed's watch, he heard them. Distant hoofbeats, circling, searching. Crow's hunters were closer than he'd hoped. At dawn, they rode hard, pushed the horses to the edge of exhaustion. By noon, they'd covered another 20 miles. That's when the first shot rang out. The bullet kicked up. Dust 3 feet to Jed's left. He yanked the reins hard, turning the horse toward a rocky outcrop. Hold on, he shouted. 3 riders burst from cover behind them, Crow's men, wearing dusters and gun belts, faces hard as the land they rode through. Jed spurred his horse toward the rocks. Another shot, this one closer. Buzzing past his ear like an angry hornet dot, they reached the outcrop. Just as a third shot hit the ground where they'd been a second before. Jed pulled Ayanna off the horse and pushed her behind a boulder. Stay down. He grabbed his rifle, levered around into the chamber, and returned fire. One of the riders went down, whether dead or wounded, Jed couldn't tell. The other 2 scattered, taking cover. For a moment, there was silence except for the wind and the harsh breathing of frightened horses. Then a voice called out, "Cross. Give up the girl and ride away. No one else has to die." Jed recognized the voice. Wade Hollister, one of Crow's top enforcers, a man who'd killed more people than cattle in his career. "Can't do that, Wade," Jed shouted back. "Then you're a fool. Crow's got 20 men coming. You can't outrun us all." Jed looked at Ayanna. She was pressed against the rock, breathing hard, but her eyes were clear. Not panicking, calculating. "There's a canyon," she whispered, "half-mile east, narrow. They can't flank us there. Can we make it? Only one way to find out." Jed fired 3 quick shots, not aiming, just keeping heads down, then grabbed Ayanna's hand. "Run." They scrambled to the horses, mounted. Jed fired twice more as they kicked into motion, racing toward the canyon Ayana had mentioned. Behind them, Hollister and his men were mounting up, shouting, giving chase. The canyon entrance appeared a narrow cut between two rock walls, barely wide enough for a horse. Jed plunged through, rocks scraping his legs, Ayana right behind him. They emerged into a tight passage with walls 20 feet high on either side. Perfect defensible position. Terrible place to be trapped. How far does this go? Jed shouted. Mile, maybe 2. Opens onto the Guadalupe River. If they could reach the river, they could lose their trail in the water. Big if. Gunfire echoed behind them. Hollister's men had entered the canyon. Jed and Ayana rode hard, the canyon walls blurring past. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew louder. Then suddenly the canyon opened up. They burst out onto a wide riverbank, the Guadalupe flowing fast and muddy from recent rains. Without hesitating, Jed spurred his horse into the water. Ayana followed. The current was strong, trying to pull them downstream. The horses fought it, eyes rolling white with fear. Behind them, Hollister and his men emerged from the canyon. There, Hollister shouted, raising his rifle. The shot went wide, splashing water 10 feet to Jed's right. He didn't return fire, needed both hands to control the horse in the current. They made it to the far bank, clawed their way up the muddy slope, and disappeared into the thick brush beyond. Behind them, Hollister stood at the water's edge, cursing, "Keep going." Jed shouted to Ayana, "Don't stop until dark." They rode until the sun touched the horizon, until the horses were stumbling with exhaustion, until Jed's shoulderwitch had taken a graze he hadn't. Mention throbbed with every heartbeat. When they finally stopped, Ayana saw the blood. "You're hurt. It's nothing. You're bleeding through your shirt." "That's not nothing." She used water from the canteen and strips torn from her own dress to bandage it. Her hands were gentle but efficient. "Practiced. You've done this before," Jed said. "My mother was a healer. Before the soldiers came. I'm sorry. Words don't change the past." She tied off the bandage. "But actions can change the future. That's why we keep riding." Jed looked at her, this fierce, broken, unbreakable girl who'd survived torture and kept fighting. "How far to San Antonio? If we're lucky, 3 more days. And if we're not, then we die trying. But at least we die standing." Jed nodded. "I can live with that." They made camp in a small cave, no fire, taking turns on watch again. During the night, Jed heard the distant sound of many horses, not close yet, but coming. Crow had called in reinforcements. The real hunt was just beginning. The third day, Jed's shoulder got worse. The wound wasn't deep, but infection had set in, red streaks radiating from the graze, fever making his vision swim. He tried to hide it from Ayana, but she noticed. "You need medicine," she said, as they rode through mesquite scrub. "We need to keep moving. You'll be dead in 2 days if we don't treat this. Then I'll be dead. But you'll be in San Antonio with that map." Ayana was quiet for a long moment. "Then, there's a settlement. 20 miles south. My people trade there sometimes. Medicine woman named Rosa, she can help. It's a detour, it's necessary. A dead man can't protect anyone." Jed wanted to argue, but another wave of fever hit, making the world tilt sideways. He gripped the saddle horn, held on. "Fine," he gasped. 20 miles. They rode through heat that felt like drowning. The sun hammered down, relentless. Jed's fever climbed higher. He began seeing things at the edges of his vision riders that weren't there. Shadows that moved wrong. Ayana took the reins of his horse, leading both animals. She sang softly in her own language, a healing song, she said. Jed didn't understand the words, but the melody was soothing. The settlement appeared late afternoon, a cluster of adobe buildings. A well, a few scrawny chickens, scratching in the dust. Not much. But civilization. Rosa turned out to be 70 if she was a day a Mexican woman with hands gnarled by arthritis, but eyes sharp as knives. She took one look at Jet's shoulder and spat, "Pendejo. You let this go too long." She hauled him into her small house, sat him down, and went to work. No gentleness, no sympathy. Just efficiency born of treating dozens of men too stubborn to seek help until they were dying. The pain when she cleaned the wound was extraordinary. Jed gritted his teeth, sweat pouring down his face. Ayanna held his hand, squeezed hard when he needed it. Rosa packed the wound with herbs that smelled like old earth and bitterness, then wrapped it tight. She gave Ayanna a small leather pouch. Make tea from these. 3 times a day. He'll live. How much do we owe you? Jed asked through clenched teeth. Rosa looked at Ayanna. You're Apache, yes, running from something. Someone. Rosa nodded slowly. Then you owe me nothing. Anyone running from powerful men has already paid enough. As the sun set, Jed felt the fever finally breaking. The herbs were working. He'd live at least long enough to finish what he'd started. That's when the riders arrived. 7 of them, led by Wade Hollister. They rode straight into the settlement, guns drawn, faces hard. We're looking for a man and an Apache girl, Hollister shouted. Anyone seen them? Silence from the settlement. No one moved. No one spoke. Hollister's eyes swept over the buildings, then landed on Rosa's house. Search it. 2 men dismounted, walked toward the door. Inside, Rosa moved faster than Jed would have thought possible. She pushed Ayanna toward a back room. There's a root cellar. Go. What about I'll handle this? Go. Ayanna grabbed Yet's arm, pulled him up. They stumbled toward the back room as the front door burst open. Hollister entered, pistol drawn. Rosa, you harboring fugitives. I'm harboring no one. Just treating my rheumatism. Hollister's eyes swept the room. Saw the bloody bandages, fresh recent. Where are they? I don't know what you're talking about. Hollister raised his gun, pointed it at Rosa's head. Last chance, old woman. Rosa spat at his feet. Do your worst. I've lived long enough. For a heartbeat, Jed thought Hollister would pull the trigger. His finger tightened on the gun, then a voice from outside. Wade. They're running. Hollister cursed, turned, ran out. Jed and Ayanna had burst from the root cellar and were making for the horses. They'd almost reached them when Hollister's men opened fire. Bullets kicked up dust. Ayanna stumbled, caught herself. Jed returned fire 3 shots, quick and aimed. 1 man went down. The oath. The others scattered. They mounted the horses and rode like hell, leaving the settlement behind in a cloud of dust and gunfire. Behind them, Hollister screamed orders. The pursuit resumed. But something had changed. Jed's fever was gone. His aim was true, and he was done running. There's high ground ahead, Ayanna shouted. We make a stand there. Against 7 men. Against however many it takes. I'm tired of being hunted. Jed looked at her. This girl, who'd been tortured, hunted, shot at, and still refused to break hand, made a decision. All right, he said. We stand. They rode for the high ground, 7 guns following, and the Texas sun bearing witness. The ridge was perfect high ground with rocks for cover, clear sight lines in all directions, and only one approach. Defensive position, a general would envy it. It was also a killing ground with no escape route. Jed and Ayanna dismounted, took positions behind the largest boulders. Jed checked his weapons, rifle with 9 rounds left, revolver with 6, hunting knife as a last resort. Ayanna had a pistol. Jed had given her 4 bullets. Not enough. Never enough, but it would have to do. Hollister and his men approached slowly, spreading out. They weren't stupid. They knew walking into a prepared position meant casualties. Cross. Hollister's voice echoed off the rocks. It doesn't have to be like this. Give us the girl, and you walk away. Can't do that, Wade. Why? She's nothing to you. Just an Indian girl with a story that don't matter. Jed looked at Ayanna, saw the wounds on her wrists, remembered her hanging from those posts while men laughed. She matters to me. He shouted back. A pause. Then, Hollister's laughter, harsh and brittle. Then, you're a fool, and fools die. The shooting started. Bullets screamed off rocks. Wind through the air kicked up stone chips that cut like razors. Jed fired back, each shot deliberate. One of Hollister's men fell, clutching his leg. 6 left. Ayanna fired, missed, fired again. Clipped a man's shoulder, sent him spinning. 5 left, but they were closing in. Using cover, advancing like men who knew their business. Jed's rifle clicked empty. He drew his revolver, kept firing. Another man down. 4 left. Then pain exploded in Yet's side. He looked down, saw blood spreading across his shirt. When had he been hit? He couldn't remember the bullet, just the sudden fire in his ribs. Jed. Ayanna's voice, distant and strange. He tried to respond, but his legs gave out. He slumped against the boulder, revolver slipping from his fingers. Ayanna grabbed the gun, kept firing. 3 shots. 2. 1. Empty. Hollister and 3 men emerged from cover, guns pointed, out of bullets. Hollister smiled. That's a shame. Ayanna stood, hands empty, chin high. Do it then. But the map survives. The truth survives. The map. Hollister laughed. Crow don't care about the map anymore. He cares about making an example. You and Cross are going to hang side by side where everyone can see. That's the rifle shot cracked across the ridge. Hollister's hat flew off his head. He dove for cover, his men scattering. More shots, precise, professional. One of Hollister's men went down. Then another. From the east, riders appeared, a dozen of them. Led by a man in a long coat and a marshal's star, Marshal Amos Reed, he rode straight onto the ridge like he owned it, rifle in one hand, badge catching the dying sunlight. Wade Hollister. Reed's voice carried like thunder. You and your men are under arrest for attempted murder of a federal witness. Federal witness. She's under federal protection as of right now. And you just tried to kill her in front of a U.S. Marshal and 12 deputies. Drop your weapons or drop dead. Your choice. For a long moment, Hollister looked like he might fight. Then he saw the rifles pointed at him, saw his remaining men already surrendering, and threw his gun down in disgust. Reed dismounted, walked to where Jed lay bleeding. You must be Jedediah Cross. Hell of a ride you took to get here. How did you know? Jed gasped. Had a telegram 2 days ago. From an old Mexican woman named Rosa, said a good man was bringing me the truth. And that I'd better get off my ass and meet him halfway. Reed smiled, figured she was right. He turned to Ayanna. And you're the girl with the map? She pulled the blood-stained leather from her dress, held it out. The proof. The real borders, everything Crow stole. Reed studied it carefully. This'll do. This'll do just fine. He looked at his deputies. Get these men to San Antonio. Lock them up tight. And someone get a doctor for Cross before he bleeds out. As the deputies worked, Reed knelt beside Jed. You did good, son. Real good. Not many men would risk everything for someone else's truth. Had to, Jed whispered. My father, he would have wanted. Your father would be proud. The world was going grey at the edges. Jed felt Ayanna's hand grip his, felt her lean close. Don't you dare die, she said fiercely. Not after bringing me this far. Wasn't planning on it, Jed managed. Then the darkness took him. Epilogue. What grows in ashes 3 months later. Jedediah Cross stood on the porch of his ranch and watched the sunrise paint the Texas sky in shades of copper and gold. The wound in his side had healed, leaving an ugly scar but full mobility. The shoulder was fine. The fever dreams that had plagued him in the hospital were gone. But he wasn't alone anymore. Ayanna emerged from the house, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Jed, leaned against the porch rail beside him. Reed sent word, she said. Crow's trial starts next week. Federal charges, theft, fraud, attempted murder. He's looking at 20 years if convicted. If rich men have lawyers. But Reed says the evidence is solid. The map, the testimony, Hollister's confession. She smiled grimly. He thinks Crow will hang. Jed sipped his coffee. And your people. The government's returning the land, all 20,000 acres. It'll take time, paperwork, surveys, negotiations, but it's happening. That's good. That's real good. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the day arrive. Down the fence line, Jed could see the new boundary markers, official ones, placed by government surveyors. The land was being returned to its rightful owners. "What will you do?" Jed asked. "Go back to your people." Ayanna was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. Part of me wants to, but part of me," she turned to look at him, "part of me has already made a different kind of home. Here. If you'll have me. Not as property. Not as debt. But as partner. Someone who stands beside you because she chooses to, not because she has to." Jed felt his throat tighten. I'd like that a lot." "No promises," she warned. "No ownership. Just to people trying to build something good from all this bad. Sounds perfect to me." In the distance, riders appeared, Apache riders, led by an older man with silver in his hair. Ayanna's uncle, come to see the white man who'd risked everything for one of their own. They rode closer, and Jed felt his hand move instinctively toward his gun belt. Ayanna touched his arm. "Easy. They're not here to fight. They're here to thank you." The riders stopped at the fence line. The older man dismounted, walked forward. He studied Jed for a long moment. Then did something unexpected. He extended his hand. Jed shook it, feeling the strength in that weathered grip. The man spoke in Apache. Ayanna translated. He says, "You have brought honor to your word. That you are welcome on Apache land. That if you ever need help, you need only ask. Tell him," Jed said, "that the honor is mine, and that I'll always stand for what's right, as long as I have breath." Ayanna translated. The older man smiled, nodded, and returned to his horse. The riders turned and left, dust rising behind them. Ayanna watched them go. "You know what this means? They've accepted you, a white man, accepted by my people. That almost never happens. I'm just a cattleman who did what anyone should have done." "No," she turned to face him. "Most people would have ridden past. Most people would have pretended they saw nothing. You stood up when standing up meant dying." She took his hand. "That's not common. That's courage." Jed looked at their joined hands, his weathered and scarred, hers marked by rope burns that would never fully fade. To people who'd been broken by the world and somehow found wholeness together. "My father used to say, a man who won't stand for what's right isn't a man at all," Jed said quietly. "Just took me 47 years to actually live by it. Better late than never." They stood on that porch as the sun climbed higher, painting everything in shades of gold and promise. The land stretched out before them, returned land, honest land. Land that no longer carried the stain of theft. And in that moment, Jedediah Cross understood something he'd never quite grasped before. Courage wasn't about being unafraid, it was about being terrified, and standing up anyway. It was about knowing the cost and paying it. Anyway, it was about seeing injustice and refusing to look away, even when looking away would save your life. "Come on," Ayanna said, pulling him toward the house. "We've got fences to mend and cattle to feed. The work doesn't stop just because we're heroes." "We're not heroes. Then what are we?" Jed smiled. "We're just two people who decided to stand their ground when the world told them to run. And in the territory of West Texas, under the endless sky, that was enough. That was more than enough. It was everything."